All right. Well, it's a little past 7 o'clock, so I am going to call the July 7th, 2020 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can I just get roll call attendance, please?
Dave Cortez, present.
Al, you need to unmute.
Al Davis present.
Mike Hughes present.
Kevin Morris present, and Tim Bonin tardy is what we'll say until he shows up. One of the first things that I would like to do under my announcements is I have a very large pile of certificates of appreciation that I wanted to at least send out. I was going to have the other members of the board that are here sign them as well. As you know, with the COVID pandemic that had taken place, the town of Douglas had an overwhelming outpour of volunteerism in town, especially as it pertained around the community food program. I know that myself and the town administrator had gone down and with Representative McKenna and issued some certificates of appreciation to the ladies down at the school that were working in the cafeteria. But I wanted to at least make sure that the other people that just really stepped up and helped out from day one were acknowledged and recognized for all their hard work and dedication to the community. So I'll kind of go down through the list and read them all off. First and foremost was to Patrice Russo, who was our section chief for the food program, as well as our senior center or
Coordinator.
Or director. I can honestly say without Patrice taking over the way that she did, this food program would have never have happened. So there's a certificate of appreciation for Patrice and a heartfelt thank you from myself and I'm sure from the rest of the board for all of her hard work and dedication on it.
Excellent.
I'm not reading that one. That one's to me. I delivered food too. There's another one to Tina Jackson, my better half. Tina, during the pandemic, was doing meal deliveries to Riddlebrook, as well as laundry to some of the residents of Riddlebrook that were diagnosed with COVID-19. She also was doing all of the fire department laundry on an as-needed basis. Also, potentially COVID-19 based laundry that was in biohazard bags. But she actually stepped up from the very beginning of the pandemic and followed it all the way through to the very last meal delivery that we did. So thank you to Tina. To Matthew Wojcik, who is our town manager or town administrator. Matt served as our civil defense director throughout the course of the pandemic. He also was key in the community garden. He also helped do a lot of the facilitation of the Emergency Operations Center. And getting all the planning and documentation required so we could get reimbursements properly. So thank you, Matt, for all of your work above and beyond your normal job description. Brian Delaney also showed up part of the way through the meals program once we started having the bus delivery. Brian is the principal over at the middle school. So he did go out and ride some of the buses, making sure that some of these meals were delivered to the folks that needed them. Josh Romano, who is our principal at the high school. Josh also was present pretty regularly throughout the EOC, was instrumental once we did take over the school facilities for the meals program, and helping with the coordination and the logistics behind it. And Josh also rode buses, getting meals out to families that needed them. Mary Delphos, so also part of the food outreach program during COVID-19. Justin Snook, the library director, he also was doing some of the meal deliveries and coordinations and phone calls out to the elderly. Lisa Postma, also pretty much the same idea. I can go down through they all. Christine Furno, I actually had the pleasure of riding one of the buses. I wouldn't necessarily say pleasure of riding a bus, but now I understand why so many kids walk to school. But Chris also said town clerk was out delivering meals, making sure that the community got fed. Lori Burrows, Dick Skinner, who I believe is he's on the Sunshine Club,
Board of Health
on the Board of Health.
and senior activist, the senior center.
So he was also, I think he was pretty actively involved with the garden as well as with the food
He
delivery.
waters every day.
So, and I think he was helping managing the donations that were coming through as well. Rebecca Deon Lavalley, also was on the food program. I'm just going to read through names. I can go through for hours explaining it all. Gail Bowen, Kim Sierra, Sean Sierra, I believe they were delivery drivers out of the school program. Pamela Schwartz, Connor Goncalves. Connor actually is on the CERT team in Douglas. I think Connor was there from day one. One of the first volunteers on the CERT team to actually ask to go and deliver meals, and did not miss a single day. So I think it was, what did she say? It was almost 3 months, 3 consecutive months of meal deliveries.
Yeah.
Meg Schelsman, Ben Tassino, and kind of a special call out to Ben. He was kind of the jack of all trades. So he did some of the meal deliveries, he helped coordinate food transport. I know he helped out with logistics with the fire department. I think he also managed to get us some PPE when we needed it. So Ben was kind of our go-to guy when there was something that we needed to figure out. He just stepped up and got it done. Jennifer Stinchfield, she works with the senior center, and she was also from day one with the food program, which started at St. Denis and then moved to the schools. Janice Cahill, James Duchesne, and Sandy Hansen. So those are the remainder of the volunteers that were essential in us. What was the total meal count we had managed to deliver?
Patrice will probably correct me, but I think it was all said and done by the last day, close to 27,000.
That's a heck of an accomplishment.
And I think we may have made as many as 10,000 wellness calls out to people, because they were obviously repeated multiple times. And that was library staff and the senior center staff reaching out almost all day, every day, making sure that people were comfortable and had what they needed at home.
Yep. So I know most of the people that step up and do volunteering, they're certainly not looking for anything from the town, other than it's just a sense of community and they're trying to help out. But I wanted to make it a point to let each and every one of these people know that I sincerely feel that we managed to keep our most vulnerable citizens in town safe through the facilitation of this food program. And I personally thank each and every one of you for your hard work and dedication and commitment to the town of Douglas. Anybody got anything else? Okay, so with that being said, again, thank you to everybody. We can move into item number 1 on the agenda, which is the proposed general bylaw change and the Board of Selectmen policy by Teresa Madison. I believe we'd asked for Attorney Kate Federoff, who's unavailable, but there is representation from her firm.
I see.
All right, just a, yeah. So just a quick synopsis. Teresa had put a petition in front of the Board of Selectmen asking us to add an additional warrant article to do the implementation of a 1,200-foot buffer zone as it pertains to recreational marijuana facilities. The position from the board was we were moderately apprehensive about putting zoning in place, considering we're the licensing authority, which would give us the opportunity to make adjustments as needed as part of the stipulation of the license. But we did reach out to our attorney on this for better clarification, and I'll turn that over to our representative from, is it Talaman's office?
Yeah, Talman and me. Our meeting.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Winter here from Meet Tallerman and Costa. Hope everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
So I understand that the board was looking for some general feedback and guidance on our reaction to this proposal. If you'd like to start with me, I'm happy to jump in and share my thoughts on, what's in front of the board. If you want to hear the presentation from the proponent, that's fine as well. But I'm happy to jump right in.
If that's all right, I would ask you to do that. We did get a very thorough and hearty discussion on the proposal from Teresa. So I would like to get council's thoughts and ideas on this.
Sure. Well, let me just, if I may, set the stage in a couple of sentences. So, as you alluded to earlier, there's multiple layers when you're reviewing an applicant, such as a marijuana retail facility, and all the way to the highest level being zoning, and then down to a general bylaw. Then the bylaw allows the selectmen to adopt rules and regulations pursuant to your licensing authority. And then underneath that is sort of a statement of policy, which isn't a regulation, it doesn't have the force of law, but it's sort of notice to any applicant that that's a subject matter that the board would consider that any applicant should be prepared to discuss if they're going to apply for a license. Now, separate from that regulatory scheme, you negotiate an HCA with any potential applicant. So that's something completely and separately different. That gets, sort of looked at as the town's power to contract. So you have probably the broadest discretion in that context, because essentially you're two private parties that get to negotiate a contract. You have a great deal of discretion in choosing who you want to work with in that context. So the proposal that you have in front of you, suggests an amendment to the general bylaws, which would codify a new setback into your licensing requirement. So, as a general matter, we typically, as lawyers, like to see things, in writing so that they can be applied, fairly and equally to all applicants, and everyone's on notice, and it gets away from the sort of concern that people often have that a board could apply a regulation on an ad hoc basis and sort of pick and choose how they apply it. So a general bylaw sometimes gets away with that, gets away from that. Now, you can do the same thing through a regulation. So it has the same force and effect of law. Obviously, your bylaw empowers the board to adopt a regulation, so it would have the same force and effect. And of course, there's the added convenience that it doesn't go through town meeting, and it's a regulation, which means the board's free to examine it in the future and change it as it sees fit if it's not working the way you intended, or there's other tweaks that you want to make through it. So the last option sort of on the table is a statement of policy. So that doesn't have the force and effect of a bylaw or a regulation. So it carries slightly less weight, and it is subject to a potential that policy is something that the board doesn't have to follow. It's just a statement of intent, essentially. But what it does do is sort of focus where the board might go when someone applies for a license, because it's going to put anyone on notice that if they were to apply, that's going to be a consideration that the board is going to take up during the licensing process. And while you're not bound by it, and you couldn't deny a license on the basis of it, because it's just a policy, it's not a regulation, it certainly puts it squarely in front of the board that an applicant would be expected to address it, and that the board would be, on firm ground to raise it as a concern. So, and I'm not getting into any policy considerations why you want this or what the costs and benefits would be for having this, but obviously, there are a number of arguments pro and con, and some are articulated in the emails from the proponent here about, not only, traffic concerns and ingress and egress concerns, but also, the general concern that gets raised often in these situations are just, clustering of two similar businesses. Often towns want to encourage, the viability of new business. And if you have two side by side, they might detract from each other. So I don't want to get into the policy considerations, but Those are some of the reasons why I would think it would be fair game for the board to have such a policy or have such a regulation and to require applicants to, at the minimum, address it. And likewise for the board to address it in their decision-making. And if the board wants to take it a step further and make it either a regulation or a bylaw, then it would be a requirement. An applicant would have to comply with it. So those are my initial thoughts. I'm happy to field any questions or explain any of those points in more detail if you'd like.
So I guess my question would be what would the recommendation from council be to have the cleanest methodology to where we're not going to be doing any harm to existing businesses? I'll be perfectly candid, like the idea of trying to get in and messing around and tweaking with zoning or putting regulations on any specific zone, to me is just a road fraught with peril, and it just seems mucky to me.
It certainly, just to single out zoning, that would be the most problematic because there's grandfathering in zoning. So if someone were to propose it as a zoning amendment, all someone would have to do is file a perimeter plan, freeze the lot, and they'd be grandfathered from it. So it wouldn't even have the effect that might have been intended by it. So my suggestion, the cleanest version, if the board does feel inclined to adopt this provision in some way or fashion, would be either through a statement of policy or through a board regulation. And I can explain why I think a bylaw, can be somewhat difficult and a bit cumbersome. A regulation would have the same force effect as the bylaw would do, but it would give more flexibility to the board. There's no grandfathering, of course, in the regulations or the general bylaw, but it would require an applicant to comply with that. So it would be a hard and fast rule. It would bar an applicant from obtaining a license if they didn't comply with the regulation. So that's one of the reasons why you might consider policy, because that would give the board more flexibility. It's not a hard rule, but the board could certainly consider it, and it could be a stone on the scale of the decision, so to speak.
And if we go with either a policy or a regulation, we can make it extremely specific to, this is our policy on recreational marijuana retail facilities.
You can. You can make it as specific or as broad as you want. You can make it a general statement of intent. It could read something along the lines where, to facilitate and foster more business opportunities without impairing the viability of existing businesses. It's the policy of this board to locate facilities no closer than, X feet from a neighbor. So it could be that broad. Or if you want to dial it in even more and focus it, you could do that too. But those are really policy considerations. But again, we're focused on the sort of more regulatory side of things, but I don't mean to suggest that without a policy or without a regulation that the board couldn't consider a setback. For example, if a new applicant came in tomorrow and proposed to be located 500 feet away and asked the selectmen to enter into negotiations for a host community agreement, the board could still raise a concern about proximity to an existing business and, sort of draw down. If the board's intent is to, foster a good economic climate and have, two viable businesses, I would think that would be a valid concern.
Go ahead.
Brian, question, Dave Cortez, Vice Chairman of the Board. Well, what about a policy statement that this is one of many factors that we would consider in an application? A buffer zone or any type of setback, if it was necessary on a case-by-case basis. Is that something that you see as doable?
I do. And again, there are pluses and minuses to doing a policy versus a regulation. So the bylaw authorizes and empowers the board to adopt regulations. So So an applicant would be free to say, well, that's a great statement of policy, Board of Selectmen, but it's not a regulation. So you can't really hold that against me. So the counter argument to that is, well, sure, but it's a statement of intent, and those are the things we're concerned about. So we're going to discuss them. And those will be points of interest that the board is going to want to hear from you on. So they become talking points. But again, they don't have the force of law as a policy. It's just a statement of intent. And if you were to deny a license applicant based on a statement of policy, that wouldn't be enough. It would be the substance behind the policy that you'd be standing on. So instead of me, so for example, if I were defending that case in court, I wouldn't wave around the policy. I would say the board was guided by a policy, sure, they had a written policy enforced in effect, but what the board's decision was really based on is the merits of the application.
Right.
And here are all the concerns the board had on the merits. So it becomes just a guidance document. So there is a weakness to it. And certainly a regulation has greater force and a bylaw has even more force than that. But those have their downsides.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you to council, I just considered another alternative. What if we modified the agreement we have with the applicant that's concerned about this issue, put the buffer in that agreement, and then wouldn't that give us complete flexibility to deal with these situations as they arise?
If I understand you correctly, I'm not sure that I do, are you suggesting you put a provision in the HCA for the existing business that no other business be located near it? Here's why I think I'm not sure that would work, and that's because the contract with the HCA is between you and that business, and it doesn't bind any third parties. So what you're really trying to regulate or address is the new party that comes into the equation that you don't know about. So let's say I don't know anything about the town of Douglas, and I'm just looking for a place to locate my new business, and I come to town hall. Now, what's going to guide me into knowing, what the town is interested in and what it's not interested in? And I'm not going to look at a contract that the town has reached with an existing business. It doesn't govern me. So I would look for a statement of policy, I'd look for a bylaw, I'd look for a regulation. And, and for example, I'm sure you have an application form. So the first thing I would pick up is an application form, and attached to that application form would be your policy statement, and it would be your regulations.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
So what I'd like to say is Attorney Winter, excellent. He's right on the same wavelength as I was when I spoke to you last week. When I explained that to have this in place, you have to have something that somebody can read. You can't enact something if they don't know what they're coming before. So everything that he's saying is right along the lines of what we were discussing. I think one of the issues here with Chairman Kevin is that you keep focusing on the word zoning. Okay, this bylaw would be squarely a subsection under marijuana, and it would only apply to marijuana. It would have nothing to do with all the other retail businesses. And in other towns, they do have under their marijuana bylaws their buffer zone. I think the word zone is what's getting confusing here. Just because the word zone is there doesn't mean that it's a zoning law. It is only governed by marijuana, and Matt brought that up several times on our last meeting. So we shouldn't be so afraid to say buffer zone. But Brian and I are on the same wavelength that you have to have something in writing. You have to let them know what they're coming before. You have to let people have a viable business, especially people that are expending millions of dollars, taking all the risk to bring business to your town. So if I'm coming to your town and I'm the first one here, as Matt said in the last one, get there first, win the race, get your clientele. Then, as it was brought up in the meeting in April 7th, you have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure I have a viable business. You can't cluster me. It's not good business. Now, right now, you have 3 HCA's. I discussed that with you, which is plenty for the town. Uxbridge had 3, they gave out 4. It's way too much, and they have a bigger population than you. We don't even know what this business is going to do. No one knows what this business is going to do in your business, in your town. So don't you think we should go slow and easy, see how 1 goes, see how 2 goes, see how 3 goes, and then think of the future? But with that being said, we have to have bylaws that people know what they're coming before when they sit with you. You have the right to talk about buffer zones because planning is discussing alleviating congestion obligation. So buffer zone is not as bad as you think it is because it's only governed by marijuana. Regulations aren't as cut and dry, but better than just a policy. Policy doesn't work. Policy is willy-nilly, as we said. They can say, well, why me and not the other one?
Any thoughts, Mr. Vice Chairman?
Just underscore one point, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of the proponent, but just it raised a thought in my mind. Just to make the board aware, this is kind of a new area with respect to marijuana businesses, but it's not so new with respect to liquor licenses. And we do have a couple of cases where, obviously you don't zone, liquor licensing. It's, it's a local license, it's a selectman's license. There are cases where a license was denied because it was too close to a sensitive receptor, which could be a school, or it could just be another, retail shop. It could be another package store. And the towns were affirmed in those cases for taking the action that they did because they rested their denial on the basis of what's a buffer zone, proximity to another similar business or some other sensitive receptor. So it's certainly a viable concept. The question is just, how do you want to go about accomplishing that?
I think I'm more in favor, if I was to do anything, do it via either, I just don't like the bylaw idea.
I don't like anything that restrictive and that specific. I'd rather have something that addresses the issue that Teresa brings up, which is a valid one, but also gives this board and future boards flexibility to deal with other issues. And, once you open Pandora's box, I don't see any reason why it should be, has to be, will be just...
It's the Douglas Town meeting, I want to hear it. I want to see if dipshit gets in front of it tonight, okay? This was a meeting, so listen to it.
Somebody may want to mute.
Yeah, somebody needs to hit mute.
I hear what I think I heard.
I don't necessarily think it's an issue that's just limited to marijuana. I think that a general policy will allow the board some flexibility while dealing with certainly the marijuana industry, or cannabis industry, I should say, and then other retail industries as well. And I think for that reason, I'd probably be in favor of a policy of the board. And I don't see any reason that we can't publish it on the application. Certain factors that the board will be looking at are A, B, C, and D, and proximity to any other retail outlet, and certainly another cannabis outlet. And I think if we take that proactive step to tell applicants that it's something we're going to look at and we expect you to be able to speak intelligently on, I think we've probably done our duty as far as notice goes.
Based off of a policy under considerations, would it give us the well, an applicant comes in, let's just say they're 800 feet from Teresa's facility, and we have our policy that's published and it's on the application and all those other things, and they come in front of us to do an application for a marijuana license. Based off of that, we're looking for 1,200 feet, you're at 800 feet, would that give us cause to be able to deny that license?
The policy as I envision it, and it's certainly open to discussion, but as I envision it, I don't think I'd put numbers or specifics in there. I would just use the term proximity, closeness, nearness, whatever word you like, to another business, particularly another cannabis business, and that the new applicant has to come in and, for want of a better term, justify him or herself. as if there is a proximity issue. We just want to, I envision it as one of a list of criteria that the board uses, and that we give fair notice of what those criteria are, so that we don't waste everyone's time by having an applicant come in unable to speak intelligently on the issue.
No, I understand what you're saying, but who's to say that you're going to put these policies in place and then that you're going to enact them? We already have somebody that wants to get 800 feet permit. There is a number that has to be in place. There is a number that you can also put in your policy, because without that number, what if I wasn't, how should I say this? You already tried to give an ACA to someone 800 feet away. You already tried to give an HCA that you didn't even have at the time. And if I wasn't on watching, I would have not known, I would have had no clue as to what was going on to the business that was before you in December.
Well, an HCA is a far cry from a license and the ability to operate in Douglas.
But see, there's also confusion about HCAs and licenses. You can't give out 500 HCAs. Once you give an HCA, people are spending money and time, and then you can't say at the end, oh, I'm not going to give you a license. That HCA is the vehicle to get to the license. You don't say, here's an HCA, and then you can't have a license. Uxbridge just had a huge litigation over this, and they were forced to give a fourth one. My consultant, Brian, is on, who was firsthand in that litigation of them giving away HCAs that they didn't have. And then they ended up having to honor them. We're getting way ahead of ourselves.
I would agree.
I would slow down.
Teresa, I would agree that we're getting ahead of ourselves, and I think Attorney Winter mentioned that I think we all know that a lot of this is uncharted territory. We're just starting this. Having said that, I understand that you'd like a number, and I think there's some valid points for that. But one of the reasons I'm leery of a hard number, 800 feet, 799 feet, 801 feet, is what works on Davis Road, for example, does not necessarily work downtown. And what works downtown does not necessarily work on, say, Route 16 at the Webster line. I think distances are something that we need to look at in the context of the surrounding environment. And different areas of town are going to have basically a different idea of what's too close.
I would also, based off of that, because that's kind of got my wheels turning, is basically if you're doing an HCA in a correlation to an available license, I would also probably want to put, if we were to put a policy, is that, if you're a company, like, for example, like, let's just say Teresa wants to put in for 3 HCAs, you're not getting 3 HCAs, you will get 1. Because I'm not going to allow one company to come in and become the marijuana monopoly sitting within Douglas, because that's not good business either.
I guess I'll take the position for every rule there's an exception. And that's why I think it's an argument for a policy statement rather than a hard rule or a hard bylaw. If, for example, we had, anybody come in and they got an HCA license and then they came back and they wanted all of the rest of them, sure, I would agree with you at the onset of that it's probably not good, and we're not going to allow anyone to create a cannabis monopoly, marijuana monopoly. It sounds better, right? But what if 2 or 3 years goes by and nobody has shown any interest? At that point, I think you'd probably want to go back and revisit that original applicant and say to him or her, hey, you know what? I mean, we have these licenses or HCAs, and no one's interested in them. They've certainly had their time to come forward, and their business model doesn't work, or there's no interest for whatever reason. So at that point, you could look at it. And that's why I think I'm more comfortable with a policy. A policy is going to give us the flexibility to be able to address that. One of the things we're going to look at to address that.
That's exactly why I came before you about Flying Goose, because Flying Goose was one of those people that I was also discussing in that letter, if you remember the letter that I gave you when this all began, was that you should look at the applicant and see how serious they are. Do they have the funds? Are they ready to go like we were? We have the property, we have the money, we have the backing, we have everything to do. Flying Goose came in, they already had an HC in Uxbridge for 2 years and never did anything. They came before you and admitted instead they had no funds to do what they were doing. They had to raise the funds. So therefore, you're absolutely right. You really need to interview these people and see, are they coming to your town to really have a business? And it doesn't matter if one person has 3. It's not the person, it's the location. Location, location, location. That was established in our meeting when I came for my second one. Even Suzanne brought it up. It's not the person, it's the location. And is the person viable coming into your town? Do they have the backing? Do they have the land? Do they have the leases? Do they have the money? Do they have the drive to get it done? You have somebody before you that I brought to your attention that had one for 2 years, did nothing, and just recently sold it. So they were coming in your town to scoop an HCA for what? And you didn't even know it. And that's why we need to look at all aspects of this.
I understand. And I mean, the biggest thing is, and I'm certainly not trying to sound flippant, I would be more concerned on worrying about getting your facility open than HCA that I don't believe we've signed or executed with Flying Goose, nor have we moved forward, nor have they done their community impact survey. I don't think they've done much of anything with it. And I think that...
No, they haven't. And as far as getting open, my update is we're going before planning on the 15th. Once that's stamped, we're breaking ground. We're going to be there by the end of the year. I have given you an update since December.
Excellent.
I have been moving progressively forward every month since we came to you. And now what I'm getting at is where we are, let's bring this back to about the whole buffer. And having, as Tim brought up in the meeting on the 7th, do we have a responsibility to the people who came to us before to get, that was not in their model, to have someone next to them to have a viable business?
But Teresa, the business that you're worried about, my understanding is Flying Goose, that was looking at Davis Street as well, correct?
Any business that's going to be within 1,000 feet of me. Any business that's of same. If it's manufacturing, not a problem. If it's growing, not a problem. A retailer, the attorney himself brought it up about clustering. Clustering is not good business.
I completely understand your point. And like I said, this is why we'd reached out to council to do this. But I mean, it gives us, there's no pressing matter sitting in front of us or obstructing you from being able to move forward on your business model and plan and sitting with planning. The only thing that you're concerned about is a future date post your opening, because it sounds like you're on a fast track and ready to be opened up before anything. We don't have any other viable prospects as it pertains to marijuana, be it retail or medicinal, that's looking at Davis Street at this time, at least not to my knowledge. Is that a...
You already did. We already did. That ran out the gate, and now we have to deal with it, because I saw how it was being dealt with.
Mr. Chairman,
So now we
I
need
think
to have
that,
a bylaw, like other cities have bylaws to protect that business, as the attorney discussed with you.
With all
And
due
he gave
respect,
3 different ways to do it.
I think the
We're all
discussion
in
here should be
agreement.
less
It's just a matter
about,
of how we're going to do it.
less about specific applicants and applications and more about the general issue. Teresa has raised a general issue about proximity, and I think that we would be better off discussing that general issue.
Agreed.
I think specifics as to who has applied for what and what locations they might use are something we may use a policy or a bylaw, whatever we come up with, if anything, to address that. But I'm not sure the specifics should be part of this discussion.
Agreed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I think one thing the board would be wise to take into consideration is the nature of the business itself and how confident you feel you know that business as a layperson looking at it from the outside. So this board denied a liquor license. Now granted, it's under a completely different regulatory scheme, and it's well thought out, and it's state-run, et cetera, but liquor stores within 200, 300 feet of each other that are both going to be selling almost all the same things. A 30 rack of Natty Ice, the Bud Light, the Kendall Jackson wines, right?
Fireball.
They're 300 feet away from each other, cannibalizing each other's business because they're doing exactly the same thing. The jury is still out because I've got people from the cannabis industry telling me 2 completely different things a lot of times. That it's almost like the microbrewery, right? If the microbrewery that I favor had a store on Main Street in Douglas, right next door to another microbrewery that's very popular, but in my mind isn't as good as the one that I like, I am only going to go to one store. They may both be selling India Pale Ales with the exact same alcohol content and trying to do some of the same things, but you're just going to favor one over the other. And a lot of folks who are plugged into the cannabis business will say, once you find that strain that agrees with you or that mix, then you're going to be a loyal customer, almost a subscription-based customer to the store that's open. And you're not going to cannibalize the next guy over because his stuff tastes like milkweed to you. So if you don't know exactly how that's going to pan out, whatever scheme you take for designing your consideration set around issuing of a license should be more broadly defined and not focused entirely on the distance. But you should still take it into consideration. I think I've been consistent from my perspective as your town administrator that it does need to bear in mind, we can't have 6, 7 businesses all in a row and think they're all going to be super successful. If we're looking at this as
I guess
economic diversification, then that's not in the town's best interest to have them fail.
I lean towards Dave's thought process on it, on a policy, at least for now, because it is a new industry, and we don't really know what's going to come 6 months, 9 months, 12 months from now. And I think we need to still be able to remain nimble but accommodating to the applicants that we currently have sitting in front of us. So, I mean, I think I would lean towards that because it would give us the ability, you know, based off of what I'm hearing, is these are the considerations that we're coming into, and we'll take a buffer zone, an example. You happen to be, you know, on Davis Street within 600 feet of another retail establishment, and we feel that that's, you know, to use a football term, encroachment. And, you know, is that's going to make you a non-viable business in Douglas, so we're going to deny your application. Moving on. So, but to Dave's point, leave it as more general terms, because 800 feet on Davis Street is not 800 feet on Webster Street.
Or Main Street.
Yeah. So would we reach out to, I mean, we would probably want to lean on council to help us draft said policy,
I would think so, yes.
to make it flexible.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to assist with that.
I would sincerely appreciate that. And I mean, I think it's the same way that we started walking into the whole, you know, marijuana industry when we started here. We're going to stick our toe in the water, and we're going to crawl before we walk, and then walk before we run. So, and I think that that's a fair accommodation to ensure that, you know, Z&T gets off to a good start, and that's not sitting in the back of their mind, that we will have policy put forward to at least make it so that we can protect our business and its viability. Anybody disagree?
No, I don't. Nimble but accommodating is what I got out of that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, I just,
If I may offer just a short comment, Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's a choice between certainty and flexibility. You know, it's not uncommon to draft a regulation or a policy statement that says something along the lines of, let me presume that, you know, a certain proximity will have a detrimental effect. However, any applicant is free to rebut that and show us otherwise. So I think you can actually have it both ways to a certain extent. Provide enough guidance so an applicant knows what they're getting into, but provide enough flexibility so that the board can work on its feet.
I like the sound of that.
But also, yeah, but also remember that it also has to go before, what also started this too, was planning. Davis, where the planning is concerned about all the parking that I have and who's going to be parking on that main road, and the visibility isn't very good right by Monroe. And we already discussed, you know, 500 cars a day. What are you going to do with 1,000 cars? So it's a policy and a broad spectrum that you're going to bring forth, but is it going to be? Are you going to enact it? Are you just saying it and we're going to move forward and to appease me, and then when it comes up, we're not going to do anything about it, or we're going to listen to both sides? Because you know, if somebody tries to get within 1,000 feet of me, I'm going to be there. So,
Teresa,
we know that.
Teresa, I can be pretty clear in saying this is, I guess you don't know me very well. I don't do anything to appease anyone. So I do what I feel is best and what the board feels is best for the town and community of Douglas and the businesses that are trying to do things here. And my word is my bond, and if I say that we're going to move forward on a policy and the rest of the board agrees, it's going to happen.
And that's exactly who I am. I bring forth excellence, and I expect excellence.
Remember, our success is tied to yours, Teresa. We don't want you to fail. There's no way we want that to happen.
Absolutely. I'm the one putting out all the money all the time and everything. You're absolutely
I understand.
right. That's what I'm saying. Because that's what I brought it back to, that when I came to you in December, if I had known that this was going to happen as soon as April, we would have never done this. I'm setting down roots in your town. I'm going to be part of this town. I'm an owner in this town. I want to be part of everything that's going on and everything. And I'm a very fair and equal person. I can see both sides of every story, but then I got to bring it to the middle and make a compromise. And that's what I'm looking for here. What is the compromise here?
Sounds fair to me.
It does sound
And it's
fair,
not
yeah.
just for me, it's not just for me, it's for everyone. You have another HCA, you have one on Webster Street, there's another one over there. Where are they? What are they doing? We need to protect them just as much as me over, if I move to another one. You know, this is for everyone.
All valid points.
So what would I need, Matt? I would assume I would need a motion to task council with the drafting of a policy.
So moved.
Second.
Attorney Winter, can I ask you a question? Do you feel that a policy is the best way, if they don't want to do bylaw, because you discussed bylaw, regulation, and policy? What is how do you weigh in on policy as opposed to regulation?
For us, not for
Because we're not looking at a bylaw here, obviously.
No, Teresa, and, you know, with all due respect, like, council works for the town of Douglas, not for the residents or applicants. We asked him to, you know, revise his opinion and solicit that. We solicited his opinion, which was granted to us at the beginning or the opening parts of this meeting, explaining that we did have options of bylaw versus regulation versus policy. We have heard his discussions and pros and cons on those, and I believe it's the will of the board to move forward on a policy at this point in time.
It's a motion, so.
Need a roll call.
Yes.
So, and we have a motion that's
Is
been,
this something that when you get it together, is this something that we're all going to come back around together with? Or is it
Yes.
something that you're just going to do and that's it?
so what we're asking town council to do now is to draft us a policy, or at least a guideline around a policy, which will then come back in front of the Board of Selectmen for us to look at, tweak, and adopt. There'll then be 3 readings of the policy as per our bylaws, which will then make it in force.
Okay, but once it's together, what I'm saying is it's going to be open for it's going to be open for discussion, whatever he draws up. In other words, I want to see it. I want to know what's going on. Am I allowed?
Yes, absolutely.
We'll discuss it in open meeting.
Yeah.
Presented to the board and available for discussion at 3 meetings before it will be finalized.
Right.
So you'll have plenty of opportunity to review it and give your input, Teresa.
Well, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, we can't do any of this outside of open session.
Right.
So, and anything that's in open session is open for discussion and
Right.
debate. So you do have, you know, to Mike's point, you'll have, when we actually bring the policy in front of us, once we do our fine tuning and tweaking on it to where the board's satisfied with it, we then have 3 readings of it, and each one of those 3 readings is open to discussion and further interpretation or changing.
Okay?
All right, so I have a motion that was made and seconded, and I am now looking for a roll call vote.
Cortez, aye.
Yeah, Selectman Davis?
Davis, aye.
Hughes, aye.
Morris, aye. And Bonin is not present. All right. So we can then move on, and about how long do you think it would take to get a rough draft put together from your office?
Week or two.
All
And
right.
I'd like feedback in terms of, you know, what should go in it, aside from what we've talked about tonight, some parameters. So a little if for the town, and, yeah, probably about a week or two.
Okay.
Is that consistent with what the board would like, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 weeks is a good window to look on it, and if there's questions or things, you know, I mean, you can reach out to the town manager or via email communication back and forth.
Certainly.
Excellent. All right, thank you, everyone, for the discussion on that.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so brings us to item number 2, with a discussion with the new school superintendent, Mr. Vieira. I've had the pleasure of meeting you in person, as is our town manager, so you get the chance to meet the rest of the board this evening. And I do have a special guest from residents that had actually sent an email in that would like an opportunity to introduce herself to you and maybe set up some correspondence between the two of you.
Awesome. Do you want to start with that, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely. If you like, come on up. You can take Mr. Bonin's seat.
Hi there, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, it's nice to meet you. Welcome to Douglas.
Thank you so much.
We're very excited to have you.
I'm very happy to be here.
So just to give you a little bit of context as to how this came about and me coming here, myself and a bunch of parents within the Douglas school system had some very strong opinions about the DESE guidelines that were put out in Massachusetts. And even before those guidelines were truly released, we were looking at like the purchasing guidelines and that kind of thing. So I started taking some polls within our town Facebook group to see if we were in the majority, because if we were not, I would have just shut my mouth and certainly not be present at a meeting like this. I can send you the results of those polls. I know a few people in here have already been privy to them. I've been in touch with Representative McKenna's office already. Mr. Fatman's office was nice enough to call me and kind of just put into context in the government as far as what they can or couldn't do. But anyways, I can put all of this in writing to you. I was really trying not to bother you yet because I know you just came on.
What's your name?
It's Meg Rodson. So I have 2 in the elementary school and 1 starting kindergarten at the primary school in the fall. So really quickly, just so you have an idea of like where the town was at as far as the results of this very non-scientific Facebook poll. We had 63% of the town that wanted no masks, no social distancing. 27% of the town that responded supported the guidelines that have come out, and then 10% of parents responded that they wanted to continue with online learning or homeschooling options. So again, because the majority I felt my husband and I feel very strongly with, I'm here and fighting, and the poor school committee has had to answer many, many questions online from me. I asked Lisa Brown, and she said that if you guys do not follow exactly what was put out, that we will lose state funding. So I did get to chat with Representative McKenna's office, and they confirmed that. But I can't find it anywhere that says we as a town, the school would lose funding. I can't find it on any of the websites. I know we're in unprecedented times, but I would love if you anyone pointed me in the right direction where it says, if we don't follow every single one of these guidelines, Douglas loses state funding.
Do you mind if I call you Meg?
Please do.
Are the guidelines you're referring to the ones that came out before or after June 25th?
The most recent, well, so when I initially surveyed everyone and they had put out the purchasing guidelines, which included masks for students,
Correct.
I got into an uproar because I was like, don't buy masks for my kids. Don't spend tax dollars on masks for my kids because they're not going in them. And frankly, I still feel very strongly I will homeschool before I put my children in masks in school. So that's when I initially started asking around and asking people, but then I've certainly looked at the guidelines that were just recently released.
How about I do this? I have a brief presentation that I can share now with you and the Board of Selectmen. Let me do that presentation. It may answer some of your questions. It may alleviate some of your concerns. It may also increase them. So let me go through it. Let me go through the presentation and then have the opportunity to have you ask me some additional questions. Will that work?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
You didn't think I was going to make it easy for you, did you?
It's fine. I can hit the curveball. So let me start off just by saying thank you and welcome to the to the committee and to the community. I'm thankful for this opportunity to be able to speak to the Board of Selectmen and to the residents who are watching today, a different crowd that's probably watches the school committee and has seen my interview. Just a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Paul Vieira. I'm starting my 27th year in education. I was a high school Spanish teacher. I was a high school assistant principal. I spent 10 years as both a high school principal and a middle school principal, and then the last 4 years as assistant superintendent. So this is my first superintendency. Very excited and honored and proud to be part of the Douglas community. One of the things I did upon my arrival was I established what I call a summer entry plan, and it just has 3 prongs to that entry plan. And the reason I'm just doing it over the summer is I need to take the information that I gather over the summer to be able to implement a long-term plan starting in September 1. So the first part of the plan was to be able to begin to establish relationships, which means just meeting with people. Had the opportunity, obviously, to meet with the administrative team, principals, assistant principals, tech director, so on and so forth. I've met a few teachers. As Mr. Morse pointed out, I've already met with him once. I've met with the town administrator twice, had the opportunity to meet with the police chief and the school resource officer. I've met with representatives from the Douglas Teachers Association. I met with music teacher Al Denacor today, and tomorrow I actually have a meeting, I believe at 11 a.m. with Representative McKenna as well. So the first thing was to establish those relationships. The second thing, which was critically important, is begin to make sure that the school is communicating with the public in a timely, effective, and efficient manner. I sent my first newsletter out last week, plan to do that on a regular basis. We need to have that social media presence. I was joking with the town administrator yesterday that I think in 3 days I have more friends on my Douglas Facebook account than I do on my personal Facebook account after 10 years. So that social media presence is so important. Met with principals today and told them that we need to refresh the website to make sure it's current and it's up to date. I want to make sure, I'll talk a little bit about Zoom meetings that I'm going to have with teachers in the community, and make sure that we're in lockstep with the Douglas Teachers Association. So beginning a communications plan so people know what's going on in the school. And the final part of that summer entry plan is our COVID reentry plan for September of 2020, with a lot of it focused in on the most recent guidance. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. Hopefully you'll answer some of your questions, babe. First thing we did is, about a week and a half ago, we applied for a $10,000 grant through the Department of Education. It is a back-to-school grant that we are trying to establish a program the 2 weeks prior to school start to have our most vulnerable population of students come back to school and re-assimilate back into the school community, whether that be kids who struggle social-emotionally, kids who have achievement gaps. When we applied for the grant, and we'll know in about a week and a half, 2 weeks if we get it, to start a summer school program just to get kids back into the building. We all know how tough it is for some kids after a 3-day weekend, after a week away from school. 6 months away from school is a lot. We want to try to get them back in. DESE also put out a matching grant to make sure that every student has access to technology. So I'm starting to get some preliminary numbers. That grant is due on July 21st. In order to get some technology or some additional technology into schools. Established a task force. Our first meeting is tomorrow. I'm fortunate to have the administrative team be a part of it. We have 15 teachers who are being a part of it, and then finally 6 parents have volunteered. So we have over 30 people on it. What we plan on doing, this is the review of the blueprint, is the commissioner's expectation, and also that of the governors, is they want to get kids safely back in schools. And the research that they've shared with us, the medical research, it's a 3-pronged effect to making sure kids are safe in schools. It's every kid over 2nd grade wearing a mask. It's keeping kids physically distant, which is 3 feet apart, and it's constant hand washing or hand sanitizing. Not constant, but frequent. So that's the 3-pronged approach that they're looking to do to keep kids safe. The commission is asking for us to do and submit 3 plans to him by early August. A fully in-person plan with every kid going back to school under those guidelines, a hybrid plan, which is basically a week off and a week on plan, and then the third plan is a remote learning plan. And the remote learning plan we're going to do is a two-pronged effect. One is if we have to go fully remote and we can't go back to school, but also a remote plan that if parents do not feel comfortable sending their kids back to school, a remote option for them. The commissioner was pretty clear that if we can't get all of our kids safely back in school, he will send a team out to whatever community he is and examine with his own eyes and with the Department of Education's own eyes whether or not we can't get kids into schools. If there is a reason why we can't get kids into schools, whether it's safety, he has pledged to work with Governor Baker to do whatever's needed to get kids back in school. He used the examples of bringing modular classrooms into communities and putting in parking lots, looking at leasing spaces in communities to get kids in schools. So he really wants to get kids back to school full time. The plan too is he's looking to have us create cohorts to really minimize movements inside classrooms. Guidance is coming out in the next probably 2 weeks on busing. What's busing going to look like? What's transportation going to look like? Right now, the guidance that he has suggested, which is a source of concern and stress for a lot of administrators in schools, is kids will wear masks on buses, sit 1 kid per seat, and sit every other seat. Any of us who've ever watched an elementary school bus load and unload know that that is a significant source of stress. There aren't enough buses to do that. So we're hoping he does that. He's talking about doing mask breaks and what do mask breaks look like and frequent mask breaks for kids. He's talking about doing lunches in classrooms so kids aren't in the cafeteria during lunches. And then the other big source question that comes up is what are we doing with sports? And what's going to happen. And they're working closely with the MIA as to whether or not we may or may not have sports in the fall. In my conversations with administrators, we know that there's going to be a population of parents who are uncomfortable sending their kids back to school. I fully understand that and get that. We hope that we can talk with some of those parents and understand where the stress comes from. But if families make the choice not to come back to school, we want to make sure that we're providing an adequate and appropriate learning experience for kids remotely online so that parents can access that. So that's one thing that we're working on. This task force is going to look at that blueprint that the governor has, that the commission has put out, along with the recommendations for the principals as to what the 3 plans look like. Our first meeting's tomorrow, and then we have another one scheduled for the 22nd. I'm meeting with teachers on the 13th and the 27th of July in order to present the plan to them so they have the opportunity to look at it. And then I have 2 community forums, one on July 14th and one on July 28th, to present the plan to the community via Zoom for anyone who wants to see it, to be able to look at it, ask questions, and be able to get some questions answered. So that's the plan in my 4.5, Mr. Morris, 5 days so far in Douglas that we've put together. To answer your question, I don't know where the actual chapter verse is that if we go against what the commissioner is recommending, that we would lose our funding. I haven't seen it. I don't know the answer to it. But the guidance that's coming out of DESE is that those are the 3 approaches that schools must take in order to in September 2020.
Does anyone know if that exists in writing somewhere, that we as a town would lose funding if, let's just say, one of those measures was not met?
I can, town council might be able to dig that up a little bit better. I can reach out to Senator Fatman as well, but as a general rule, it usually doesn't bode well when you go against any particular commissioner.
I know, I guess
Is it
part of me is looking at like, Yarmouth came out when he first said, you're not going on the beaches, and Yarmouth came out and said, you can go on our beach, we're opening the beaches. And then right now, I think Barnstable says, your executive orders aren't here anymore, we're not following them, so.
That's a bit different than funding. Usually what you see in statute law, and I'm sure it's buried in there somewhere, and I suspect our town administrator is searching for it now. You're usually going to see a line in there that a particular level of funding or source of funding is dependent on a system being compliant with all DESI regulations.
Okay.
So as they're changed, so I think that's what you're going to find. Where you're going to find it, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
not my specialty. But it's going to say that this funding is contingent upon a district complying with all our regulations. And as we all know, they've come out with some new regulations in the past few months. So I think, and I understand and I agree, I saw that what Barnstable and Yarmouth did. That's a little bit different. They're looking at the governor's orders. I think they're looking at them saying that they don't have any legal backing, and this is the sound of me biting my tongue, or anything like that. And so therefore, we choose not to comply with them. That's a little bit different than what we're discussing here,
Yeah.
where the state says, we have funding that we give to systems every year, but there are hoops you're going to have to jump through to get that funding. And we will unilaterally determine said hoops.
So as a point of order on that too, like Yarmouth and Barnstable don't have the same kind of dependence on state aid that
That's
Douglas
very true.
does. A lot of our budget is driven by Chapter 70 and what they call UGA, which is the unrestricted,
General government aid.
yeah.
So my next question past that is, have you seen anything that states when this is over, particularly for our schools, since we're talking about it, but, initially when all this started, we weren't overwhelming our hospitals, so we didn't do that. And then we were flattening the curve, and we did that. And our latest numbers, I think the last one I saw, we had 15 deaths in the state of Massachusetts, which has a population of 6.89 million people. So when does school get to go back to normal?
That's the
We could take up
billion-dollar
the rest of
question.
the night with that discussion, I'll tell you.
Meg, if I could answer that question.
Right.
I don't know the answer when schools will go back to normal. If you see what's happening down in Florida, down in Texas and Arizona and California, where people haven't socially distanced, they're starting to tighten up their restrictions again because they've seen a spike. I don't know what's going to happen in 3, 4, 5 months once the cold weather comes back again, once flu season is back in season in that November, December timeframe. I don't know when we're going to go back to normal. I don't think anyone does.
No, I don't think so. I just didn't know if DESI had decided that someone in our government would give us some number, some amount of months, some anything, since our state seems to be doing really well.
And I think a lot of it is, like, from what I've seen off of the governor's press conferences, is he's attributing a lot of our success to the fact that he was as restrictive as he was.
Correct.
Regarding with social distancing and wearing masks, and overall, for the most part, barring a few places, the residents of Massachusetts have been relatively compliant with the ask that's come from the governor's office. And I can assure you, nobody hates the term "the new normal" more than I do.
Good.
It drives me crazy to have to go to Walmart, and then it's like I'm halfway into the store, and I'm like, oh, my mask, and then I got to turn around and walk back to the car, and I'm a fat guy, and I don't want to walk that far. It's just not me. But everybody in the entire country is looking for the answer of when is this just going to stop? And it just, nobody has that magical answer. And then, of course, you start watching the news, and now you're hearing about a swine flu that has pandemic possibilities.
But I guess that's my point, is so when is it over? Because I can tell you, the town of Douglas, we were very sick in the month of February, and nobody cared or noticed, and it was fine. We kept our kids home, and, me and Mrs. Brundage, which is the elementary school school nurse who I talk to a lot. I have a child with a chronic illness, so she's on my speed dial. She and I have talked since then and said, COVID was here. These kids were down. We had 13 kids absent in my son's 3rd grade class. Like, all of us swear that we had it. So to me, I'm like, when are we ever going, nobody shut down anything in February until we really knew what it was. So again, now swine flu's coming. So are we just saying we're never going back to normal? And I know you don't get to make these decisions.
If President Trump's listening, we just stop dealing with China. Like, everything there, we close their embassies and say, no more China, and all will be well, and I'm going to get crucified for even saying that later, but whatever happens. I mean, unfortunately, I think I was actually chatting with Dave earlier, and I said he and I are going to be write-ins for the next presidential ballot, and we'll just fix it all.
Speak for yourself. I have enough troubles.
So there really, the answer is there's no answer. And it's as frustrating to me as it is to you, we have our fire chief here, and he's our emergency management director too. And I'm sure he'd love to have the answer on to when do I need to stop buying PPE or worrying about having to staff a second ambulance, and when is this going to hit again? I guess there's no known value to that, and it's, pardon the term, but it sucks. I wish I could tell you something different.
Yeah. Lastly, before I let you go, and I'll put a little bit in writing, I haven't emailed you yet because I knew you've only been here for less than a week, and I was not going to bother you yet. And trust me, everyone else in the town and in state government has heard from me. But the last thing, and this is big on my husband's list, is that for us, it looks like homeschooling is happening in the fall. They're not going in masks. We're not comfortable with it. It's not going to happen. So I appreciate that the state has talked about you guys having to provide online learning. You kind of mentioned Florida. I know a few people down there, and they mentioned that their state government is actually providing online learning that I guess they purchased, meaning it's homeschooling from online that's already been used and tested and seems to work. And don't get me wrong, the teachers in Douglas worked so hard and so tirelessly, and we absolutely appreciate it. Your third grade team is absolutely amazing. It was great. But that wasn't true for every grade, and I know that teachers got thrown into something that was just unprecedented. So the next big questions are, what does online learning and homeschool options look like? And if we don't go with the school curriculum that you guys are providing and we pull them and do homeschooling, is there going to be maybe a recommendation, or how do we keep our kids on track so that they can go back in when things go back to normal? Real normal, not new normal.
I can answer that a couple different ways with a little bit of information. So one thing that I met yesterday for the first time with the admin team to look at the plan. So let's specifically talk about the remote learning platform, pre-K or K to 12, if families decide not to send the kids back to school. So we're looking right now, I just actually sent an email to a rep. There are a couple of online platforms that provide English, math, social studies, science, elective courses to students that schools can purchase and basically sign kids up for an online program where they take the courses online, and that feeds it into the school. So we're looking at that. From what I've seen, those programs are more adaptable to your grades 4, probably 6 through 12. I don't know how adaptable they are for K to 5. I have an email out to the rep to have him get back to me to find out how does it work in that K to 5 space. If the answer isn't what I like, I might look to see if there are some other online platforms that can be done K to 5. That's the first answer. The next piece is, I agree with you, it's really tough if we're piecemealing things together with, you have a kid in the 2nd, 4th, and 6th grade. It'd be a lot easier to have one platform for you to go to and have your kids just do it, as opposed to having your 2nd grader be on RAS Kids, having your 4th grader be on Google Classroom, and having your 6th grader be on an online platform. We're trying to find out the best options for that. So that would be if you were with the school's online thing. If you decide to homeschool your child, which means you would unenroll them from the Douglas Public Schools, and you would send into, I believe it's my office, this is the first time I've been asked this question, you would then, I don't know if it's to me or to the principals, but you would send in your request to homeschool your kids, and you would submit to us your curriculum plan of how you plan on doing it. The onus would be 100% on you to find the curriculum, purchase the curriculum, and teach the children, your children. What the school would require typically is usually a mid-season report card towards progress, and then an end-of-year report card. But basically, you would be unenrolled from the Douglas Public Schools, and you would be responsible for the pure homeschooling of your children, and whatever resources that would go along with that would be on you to provide.
I guess, you know, if everything works out with the online learning that you're talking about, I think that sounds like a great option for someone in my position. I'm not opposed to finding my own curriculum. My big worry is, let's just take my fourth grader. They are covering, who knows, I don't know, all kinds of long division, and I'm sure it's Common Core long division, so I'm not going to teach it that way. So then, will the school be able to at least point us in a direction of a curriculum we should be looking at in order to make sure when they do re-enter, we haven't missed things?
There are so many homeschool curriculums out there that would be really difficult for us to vet out what's good and what's not good. I know that some of these online programs that we would try, if you went with the remote option that the school's providing, those are all aligned to the Common Core State framework, the Common Core frameworks, and a lot of times they're aligned to Massachusetts individual frameworks. So the nice thing of going with one of those platforms is not that re-entry back to school would be seamless, but you would know that at least if you completed, if we went with, let's say, Company X, and you completed the grade 4 curriculum, that you knew that that curriculum was very closely aligned to the frameworks. You're not getting the social emotional component that your kids have, you're not getting that intellectual component, and you're not getting that one-on-one with the teacher. But at least from the pure standpoint of being able to address the standards and the frameworks, you know that those computer programs would at least address them and hit them.
Yeah, okay. Do you know, I'm really like throwing you under the bus tonight, but do you have any idea of, you know, you said you've just started to look into them, but, you know, for me, I'm going to have to go like research homeschool. I've never homeschooled. I've never considered it. So like, how long does something like that take you to decide on?
So I'm going to, the answer to that question is, you could probably do it in 2 days. So if you look at the process, if I called the rep up and I said, come in and see me tomorrow, and I met with him, and I already know a little bit about a couple of the different programs out there, and we have the funding to make it happen, from Alpha to Omega, you're probably looking at about a week and a half, 2 week time frame from when we first meet to when it would be up and running,
Okay.
provided we have the funding. One thing we need to do is, that's just one part of a very comprehensive plan. So my goal for this plan is to have it completed, because we have to submit to the to Commissioner Riley by, I believe it's the first week of August. So my plan is to have this blueprint completed by beginning of August. And in the meantime, as we're tweaking it, be able to reach out to these different vendors and ask those questions as to, okay, if we decide to go with Company X, what's the cost? Does the district have the money to fund it? How do we fund it? And how do we get it up and running?
Okay.
It was a little vague, but it was somewhat specific.
No, I know. I mean, I know you can't give me an exact answer. I guess I'm just like, you know, how long do some of us put it off making these decisions for our kids? Because I don't want us to be scrambling either for their education.
Yeah, I'm going to put out, I think I already put it on Facebook and Twitter. I'll send the link out later on this week. I would attend that community forum on the 14th. I'm doing them at 11 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the afternoon to give, and it's the same presentation, the 11 o'clock and the 7 o'clock on the 14th. I just want to give people the opportunity, if you're home during the day and you rather do it at 11 o'clock because it's a rainy day, you have that option. If you want to go out or you're working and you're home at 7 o'clock at night, you have the nighttime option. But it's basically going over the blueprint and going over the the plans that the principals have put together for, it'll probably be about a 40-minute presentation with 20 minutes for Q&A at the
Okay.
end.
All right, that
So-
sounds great.
The plan, Meg, the plan's evolving as we speak, so maybe next Tuesday I'll have a little more, some more answers for you as to where we are, but that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry on your 5th day to really stick it to you with all of these questions.
No, and you know what? I knew this was coming. It's happening in every community. People are concerned. People want to know what the plan is. And when you don't hear things and you don't know what's going on, you don't know what the plan is, you start formulating your own opinion. You start creating your own narrative, which is why I started July 1, and our task force meets tomorrow. And I hope that, that second week, the 13th and the 14th, present to teachers, because they're also very scared too. They don't know what they're walking into. The regulations that were put out on the 25th by the commissioner were, was about 35, 40 pages in length for people to go through. Teachers want to know what they're walking into. They want to feel safe. Parents want their kids to feel safe and know what they're going into. But we have to create that plan of what it looks like, and then hopefully by the on the 14th, we'll have a pretty solid skeleton of what it's going to look like. The answers we're not going to have are things like, what does busing look like? What do mask breaks look like? What do sports look like? The plan that I present is going to be probably a 30,000-foot view plan, and then I've asked each of the building principals in 2 weeks to create their own task forces within their schools to work out the nuts and bolts. I can't get into the weeds of, which hallway in the middle school is a do not enter hallway, which hallway is a one-way, which door is the door that kids go into. I'll let building principals and their own task forces create those plans within their buildings. I toured 2 of the 4 buildings today. I was at the middle school and I was at the elementary school. We had set up classrooms with the desks 3.5 feet apart to see. I talk with my hands, I'm sorry. You can't see. To set up the desks 3.5 feet apart, a little bit more than the 3 feet, for us to see what it looked like spatially inside the classrooms. So we're doing those things to see what it looks like, to make sure that I can articulate to the community what's going on, but also so I can have a level of comfort that I know, okay, we're meeting the regulations that DESE put forward. But I would also ask you, when are your kids at the elementary and primary, or elementary and middle?
Elementary and primary.
Yeah, so when Cindy and John ask for that task force, if you so choose, be a part of it to kind of find out, the nuts and bolts of what's going on in those buildings and how they plan on doing things.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Paul. I told you I wasn't going to make it easy at all.
Well, you didn't say that yesterday, Mr. Morris, but it's all good. Board of Selectmen, I'd love to open it up to questions for you, whether it's about COVID-19, my entry plan. I'll be more than happy to answer them. I know it's a lot, but I think we made some good progress in a week and a half, 2 weeks that I've been on board to try to put something in place for.
What I do want to do is actually bring out one thing quickly that you brought up in our meeting that I want to share with the rest of the board, is that Paul is very interested in having a relationship with the town, to where there's open communication between ourselves and the district, which I think would be a breath of fresh air, and I think would make things a lot easier for us moving forward, especially, and he doesn't want to do that just around budget season. He wants to have open communications throughout the, between the district and the community, to try and make sure that we have a pretty solid partnership. So I have to, I was very impressed with that, and it definitely hit home with me, and I think it would be, like I said, I'd love to have you on our selectmen's meetings once a month and give us the state of what's going on in the district.
More than happy to come.
Thank you.
Chief?
I'd like to see a better working relationship with the building commissioner, the police and fire departments as well, with the school system.
Absolutely.
I didn't hear what the chief said.
He mirrors that he'd like to have a better working relationship with the building commissioner and the public safety chiefs in the district as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, one question that came up today, and while I have the chief, I hope I don't know if you know the answer, but the question came up today, what are we even doing for fire drills when we go back? I mean, with the mandate that you have to have a fire drill within the first 2 weeks of the school year, all those little curveballs that, you know, get thrown at you. I know I'll be asking you that question in the next couple of weeks because it's come up a couple of times. You know, a lot of stuff we need to do for planning, but love to continue to build those relationships.
Okay, what I can tell you, how I've operated in the past, and I will not be deviating from that, is we will be there on day 2 to do a fire drill. So it should be on the top of your list, because it wasn't before. And we will just come in and pull the alarm and see what happens. And and the reason is because we have to be able to, fire doesn't care. So we want to make sure that everything's ironed out and it's done early on. I know there's a lot of scheduling things that are going on in the beginning, but when we also talked about the hostile environments with the school shooter and things, we had props that were, people were barricading doors. Can't do that, it doesn't meet building code. We have all kinds of things like that that we need to iron out early.
Correct.
And the building commissioner should be involved with that as well.
Okay.
Paul, do you anticipate breaking up any common spaces for classroom use? Like the cafeteria or the gym or library?
So I'll speak to, at the high school, Mr. Romano said that he can fit all of his kids inside classrooms. His class size is adequate enough that he doesn't need to take a math class or a science class and use the gym or the cafeteria. Mr. Delaney, what his plan actually is he's actually giving every classroom teacher 2 classrooms, and they're adjoining classrooms. So he's going to be able to put the 21, his average class size, he said, is 21.5. So he's going to have about 21 kids in one classroom, but be able to have that second classroom for overflow to do it. Mr. Bell says his average class size is about 22, 23. His highest is 24. He's going to have the one classroom. I haven't made it down to Cindy's building in the primary. I don't know what we're going to use the cafeteria for. My guess right now is if we were going to use spaces like the cafeteria, the gym, it's going to be for those mask breaks where we can keep kids in rainy weather 6 feet apart, and we can open up the windows and the doors to get proper ventilation in them. So right now, that's what I see using those spaces for. It may change between now and September 1, and as we've seen with all of this stuff, it could pivot again on September 15th.
The fire chief decided to leave the microphone, but I'm sure if he was still there, he'd be saying, if you're going to reconfigure spaces that have previously been open and restrict flow of people around cafeteria or library or gym, egress and clear path. Now, it seems that the more you distance the desks, you're probably actually improving things.
I would say,
Fire
yeah.
evacuation point of view. But if you start to change the way people move around those big open spaces, before you make any plans, you should talk to the fire chief about what's going to be allowed.
Yeah, the nice thing inside the classrooms has been, in order to get the space for the desks, we've had to remove, for lack of a better word, clutter. We've been able to remove some additional stuff from classrooms in order to create the space and do it. But I guess what you're getting at, and it's a great point, is that once we start doing one-way hallways or do not enter hallways, to include the fire chief in those conversations, so he's able to come in and look at the floor plans. That's a fantastic idea. Thank you.
One of the other things we should really talk about too is we actually created disaster plans probably mid-year, and those are very important that we really should be going over those, because I know the school committee did adopt a plan that was put together, but it was a little bit incomplete, and we had to add some stuff so that if there was an issue there, say a fire or a gym collapse or something like that, that we have a principal doing an initial assessment, and what we need right off the bat, information is quickly need is the amount of victims there could be, so that we can pull the trigger on an ambulance task force, or, you know, whether we need, what mutual aid we need. And again, different type scenarios, not just one, you know, there's a fire, because we know there's all types of things that can happen. And we dug a little bit deeper this past year on it, but it's something we should probably get together on very soon.
Okay,
All right?
makes sense.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Douglas.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
I'm very satisfied.
Same here. How about Mr. Hughes? You got anything?
I'm all set. That was very helpful, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Paul.
Likewise, thank you.
And the world's most interesting selectman, Mr. Davis?
I don't know, maybe this is the most interesting superintendent. We'll judge, but I think so.
Thank you, Mr.
Nice
Davis.
to have you aboard.
Very happy to be here. Would it be helpful to the Board of Selectmen if I sent either you, Mr. Morse, or the town administrator, the link to our community Zoom session for the blueprint?
Yeah, that'd be great. If you could send it along to the town manager and myself, and we can get it distributed out to the rest of the board, that'd be great.
And again, more than welcome to have you come in, listen, see the blueprint, see a little bit more in detail.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and,
Pleasure.
and nice job on the curveball I threw at you, so you're passing tests every day.
All right. I can't hit the slider though, Matt.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
That may be what's coming in 2 weeks, you never know.
Just don't go to 2 strikes, that's all.
In 2 weeks, I'll be prepared.
Yeah. It's an out pitch. As long as you don't have 2 strikes on you, you can just watch the slider go by.
All right.
Excellent, thank you again.
Okay, everyone, appreciate it.
You too.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
We are going to pass over agenda item number 3. The Grill on Main has actually opted not to move forward with outside dining, considering the uncertainty with the way things are going and the cost of them doing it. Which brings us to item 4, which is the vote on the annual appointments of the boards and committees with expiring terms, and also a discussion regarding land council appointment and possible votes. And I'm going to assume, Mr. Davis, you're looking to push on the remainder of the appointments as we did in the past couple of meetings?
You're muted, Hal.
Yes, that's true.
So we can bypass the remainder part of it, but I would like to have a discussion on land council a little bit.
Sure.
And it is land council, right?
Just land.
So my thoughts are, is I'd like to give Matt the opportunity to at least shop out some other firms to represent the town of Douglas as it pertains to land council. One of my concerns that we have is they're the council of record for the town of Uxbridge as well, is my understanding, is our land council.
I think they're general counsel in Uxbridge.
So if some of the projects that may come down through with economic development, it makes it kludgy in my head anyway.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
It's not a bad practice to shop this out once in a while. It's not a direct attack or criticism of the incumbent in the position. It is just good purchasing, good procurement, good governance to occasionally review what your options might be. To no small extent, this is before you because I've asked. And, like tonight's session, we got very helpful advice. And generally speaking, there's helpful advice. But I think as we go forward with economic development, and it seems like almost every time we turn a corner and we have project proponents heading in the right direction to work with the town of Douglas and its various boards and commissions to get to the project that they want to build, it seems like we're constantly running into what I would call a lack of preventive maintenance to our code. In other words, so much of the verbiage is vague, or the construction is awkward. Some lawyers like that because they'll say, well, that opens the door to a multiplicity of interpretations. And some, I know this for a fact because I had a general counsel for another community say this to me once, which was, tell me what you want and I'll get it to work, which is not good lawyering.
Right.
It should be, what does the law allow us to do? And if we need to change the rules, let's change the rules. But on the flip side, if there are a multiplicity of interpretations possible, and strong reason to believe that either a legal precedent or the rest of the bylaw interpreted for its overall intent gets you to a place, then don't put something in the way of getting to that place. And when they're not, perhaps it's because there just haven't been very many commercial or industrial applicants. I've been here 3 years. We only have one active, poker in the fire right now. So I don't know what happened all those years before I was working here, whether or not the zoning code, the envelope was pushed or not. But we really have gotten to the point now where we're kind of stymied. And we have to go to town meeting to get some clarity and some clarification around what is it that the town really intended. And sometimes I think that is the job of council to bring it to the forefront and say, I think it's probably time you rewrite this zoning code. And here are some places where it's really vague and difficult to navigate. And that energy isn't there. So I'm hoping maybe this process creates the energy, spreads the energy, gets it going, because that's what we need. Little fixes, little Band-Aids on a zoning code is a bad way to do economic development, because you are more or less now tailoring your code because you have a project you like, and you're just kind of making the amendments you need to make. You're not thinking it through. For example, I think people who really care about land use issues should look at the industrial use table in the town of Douglas zoning code and ask yourself, what uses are permitted as of right in the industrial zone in Douglas? And do you want that to be your limitation? And how does it jive with the way the economy in town works now? To be specific, if screening loom is manufacturing, quote unquote, because you're processing a material, no matter how simple that process is, dumping it over an inverted V with a screen on it, and the big stuff falls off the side, the good stuff falls in the middle. If that's manufacturing, manufacturing's not allowed, according to Land Council, is not allowed outside of a building. Well, the zoning official is not going to drive around the town of Douglas and shut down the loan screening operations. How do we get to this point? And how do we get to the point where we want to keep a business in town and they need to move their existing operation from one part of town to another, and nothing's been said to them about the way they operate for 15, 20 or more years, not prior to zoning though. It's a post-zoning use, but it's been there for all these years. We're not going to bust their chops, but they want to move the same business and keep it in Douglas. Now we're going to bust their chops and make them get zoning in letters or other. The form of relief they would need isn't even available in the code. So those are the kinds of things that drive economic development people nuts, because what are we supposed to say to the project proponent? Well, I wish I could answer that question, but come back to us in 6 months after we've had ATM and maybe we can clear it up. It really shouldn't have reached this point, in my opinion. And then if it is this, for the lack of a more scientific or law school term, chuckwad, if it's this chuckwad, then make it work as long as you know what the intent is. Getting back to my prior question, used as of right in the industrial zone, if you follow the construction that we've been provided, which is that the only thing allowed is anything after a comma and after the word including, then manufacturing inside a building, warehouse and distribution is only allowed if it's a mini storage unit. But you can build a fast food restaurant as of right in the industrial zone. So I don't think, I hope that Douglas's idea of economic development in the industrial zone isn't a Popeyes, a Cube Smart, and a manufacturing to the extent that it still exists in the United States of America. Why would it be here? If that's the only thing that we're chasing, no wonder we don't have any commercial or industrial
Right.
properties, because we've made it so difficult to navigate this code that we're stuck with really nothing. I don't think that's what people intended. I think that the comma including was meant to give an example and wasn't meant to restrict all the phrasing that went before it. So warehousing, distribution, storage, wholesale, comma, including mini storage, shouldn't be interpreted that it's only the mini storage. Long story short, I'm venting a little bit of frustration, but I want everybody to see where I'm coming from, is that I think our current council would be up to the task if they were tasked with it. But let's also look at some firm resumes and have some interviews and see how other firms might approach this. And let's just see how they act. You know, will they do the research? Will they interview different boards and committees that they might be working for to see what the consensus is? There is no comprehensive plan requirement in Massachusetts. There is in Rhode Island. And it's a good thing there isn't, because people, sometimes a special interest group will take over that process, and you'll end up with something that most of the people in the town didn't want to sit through 15 hours of zoning weeds to get to the facts. They just wanted to know that, yeah, if we have a shot at getting a business, we'll get it. Long story short, I think you'd be well advised to do this. On the Labor Council front, I wouldn't advise it probably because that relationship is much closer. There's almost never a week goes by when I'm not talking to Attorney Mazer for about 10, 15 minutes about an issue, just to make sure we stay on the reservation. And I always feel like there's a crispness and a citation to authority that's really just spot on, and I would never recommend making a change. And General Counsel, I mean, that's really totally the bailiwick of town meeting and the Board of Selectmen. Is the moderator well-served? Is the Board of Selectmen well-served? I know that the other boards get an answer when they ask Rich questions, and again, pretty crisp. So I don't see the need to really do that across the board. This is where we're running into operational difficulties, and we should try to figure out, look, if there's no answer there, there's no answer there, but at least we looked at it.
I'd entertain a motion to let them do it.
I move that we empower the, okay.
Are you advocating, aside from looking at a different perspective from council, land council, are you advocating potentially looking at our zoning bylaws to make them easier to function for economic development?
I think you'll have to, Hal, and I think that's a budget question for fiscal '22 or '23. Probably '22 would be the better time to ask the question, because that would be above and beyond the typical fixed rate retainer that we have, which is service our zoning board, planning board, Concom. But it's overdue, and that's a big project. I think we all know that. That's many hours, many billable hours, usually more than one attorney.
Yep.
So I think right now how all he's looking to do interim is just get a second set of eyes and just shop it out. But to his point, like next year, we can look in saying this is an actual project and then figuring out a cost and then determining if we can budget it.
I agree completely with that approach.
Mr. Hughes? Any thoughts?
I think it's a good idea. I was on the board when we did the same thing with general counsel. I think it's a good exercise to go through periodically.
All right. Do we have a motion?
We do. I would move that we empower the town administrator to investigate the possibility of hiring alternate or replacement land counsel.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Dave Cortez, aye.
Al Davis, aye.
Mike Hughes, aye.
Kevin Morris, aye. All right. Approved minutes and possible votes.
Do you have a set in your packet?
I do, it's before the
Oh, it's
5.
before the 5.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for the June 30th, 2020 Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Dave Cortez, aye.
Al Davis, aye.
Mike Hughes, aye.
Kevin Morris, aye. Which brings us to the best part of the evening, your report, Mr. Administrator.
Well, I hope it's the quickest part. I don't want to keep it much later. This is a quick reminder to everyone that we are still in a state of emergency, both at the state and local level. And the Emergency Operations Center continues to meet. Staff meets every Monday. And we're starting to pivot a little bit towards planning, or at least prognosticating about the fall and the winter. And to answer Ms. Rosin's question, she's not here anymore, but if I had to write my exam book right now, I would say we are not going back to normal anytime soon. We have our friends in big states to thank. This is the United States of America. People move freely about the territory of our nation. Whether they comply or not with the individual states' quarantine requirements, I'd be a monkey's uncle if anybody says they can truly enforce that 14-day quarantine requirement on somebody going on vacation or for family visit or whatnot. It's just not happening. So a pessimist would say, with the rates of infection and climbing in Florida particularly, which is the epicenter of people who live in a place who aren't from there, going back to where they actually were from when things get sticky, and bringing their baggage with them. So a pessimistic view, and in many cases, if you read between the lines, you don't even have to do that. You can look at the explicit conversation from the governor of Connecticut yesterday, who halted his reopening plan at its current phase, because the fear is that we would be right back in the midst of pandemic response. Hopefully, we won't do it exactly the same way, because hopefully we've learned some lessons. We've learned enough about the science of the virus and how to wear masks and do other things to prevent the spread, where we could still have some sort of economic activity. But we are anticipating, at least, so that we're not caught unaware or unprepared, for the possibility of having to go back and restrict the economy again, having to restart the food program, having to manage staff through the winter with storms and whatnot. Who's going to feel comfortable to come in? Should we have extra contractors in place? We don't pay them until they render services, so it's not going to cost us any money. But what contingency plans will we have in place so that we can continue to deliver services to the people of the town without additional disruption? So that planning is ongoing, and there's this is sort of a mini, 2020 stinks, if anybody hasn't figured that out yet. We're in July of 2020, it's a terrible year. This is also going to be the year 2 of the 2-year EEE cycle. So last year was a bad year. This year would be, typically, if the pattern follows history, would be a worse year than last year for EEE, and then the thing would kind of squirrel away for a few years before it comes back. There just seems to be this pattern with it. There have already been 2 mosquitoes that have tested positive, both in Franklin County, so they are at moderate risk already in Franklin County, and it's only July. This is usually a fall consideration. Just so everybody remembers or keeps in mind, EEE is a bird-borne virus. It is a bird disease. There's a specific mosquito that bites only birds, and it transmits EEE amongst the bird population. And then when everybody gets real hungry, because the mosquito populations are high at the end of the year, those mosquitoes that bite us and bite other mammals will start biting birds, and they start transmitting the virus down to us. According to the scientists that were on the phone calls, we don't get sick when a mosquito bites a sick horse and then bites us. It's not how it works. It's coming from the bird itself, and it has, a horse is a dead end, a human is a dead end. A horse is always a dead end. Humans are a dead end 50% of the time, to turn a phrase. So we will be very vigilant. There are supposed to be additional trapping sites and testing sites established in those areas that were critical risk last year. The other lesson they learned is they will not break up their flyovers. When they designate a zone for spraying, they will not spray it until weather permits the entire zone to be sprayed. Partial spraying was totally ineffective. I wouldn't say totally ineffective, but 20 to 30% effective versus 70 to 80% effective when it's all done at once and the whole zone is covered. But that's Triple E. The other thing that we got to keep our eye on, and the good news is it's inversely related to Triple E and mosquitoes, is rainfall quantities. We are now in a moderate drought. April was the wettest April in history, and we have done nothing since except for occasional downbursts. But we are already needing to watch groundwater and surface water levels because it could end up being a very dry year. That would be good news on the mosquito front, very bad news for a community that has thousands of acres of dead oak trees just sitting there. So all that's being monitored. The CARES Act filing, we've made 2. The first one, we got the approval the other day. So that's everything we asked for, we got. So we got 30,000 to be artificially precise. I think it's $30,485, which we filed for has come back. The second filing was for 8,000 plus some. And that's all of the response programs that weren't already covered by donations. Just bear in mind that the people of the town were very generous. So the food program itself didn't cost anywhere near as much as it would have if there hadn't been that generosity. But what we did spend out of taxpayer funds will be reimbursed to us. All of the food supplies at the schools are being restocked with what was there originally, if we can ever figure out what was there originally. The budget, and this I guess is going to be my penultimate point here, the budget, I'm going to have to add $4,400 to it for an appraisal of the Webster Street property. We know the statute says that it does not have to be a certified appraiser that does the appraisal, that any method approved by the appraisal industry is acceptable. The difficulty is, this is commercial industrial land and it's vacant. So pulling comps and doing the analysis of utilities and all of those things are above and beyond the skill set and professional certification of our assessors. It really does require an appraisal. So I've asked for a restricted appraisal. It's less expensive, but it still meets all the requirements of the appraisal industry. It's $4,400. And that will allow us, that's the last step that before we can post that the property is for sale. So I'm just, since we're still not there yet, we don't have a final budget from FinCom. If it's okay, I'm just going to add it to the selectmen's line, the professional technical spending line. The good news was just off the cuff, the appraiser felt that my estimated sale price was quite low and that we would do better than I thought. So if in the grand scheme of things we spend $34,400 to sell something for $200,000+, the town has still done very well with it and will be fine. Lastly, kind words were said about Patrice Russo earlier during the chairman's announcements. I just want to draw attention to the fact that she's an unsung hero, which is a statewide award that one of the commission's State House awards to distinguished women who are leading public servants around the state. Patrice was given one of those awards. We are
Excellent.
Very fortunate to have her. And lastly, since some people probably saw it, you may have noticed that at 6:30 this morning, there was a pretty big car crash here in Douglas. And coming right back from vacation at 6:30 in the morning, the fire chief got to get in front of a camera and explain what happened. But many thanks to Douglas police officers and Douglas firefighters, specifically Deputy Chief Furno, who got into that car and got that person out of there, was life-flighted, and I understand is now in stable condition. So good news all around. It was a very bad accident. The person's very lucky to be alive. We're lucky we didn't have a huge fire because it was a gasoline tanker. Was it gas or diesel, Chief?
Gas.
Gas, which was obviously much more volatile at that temperature. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
A quick question for the town administrator, if I may.
Go ahead. I'm sure you know there is a move afoot in the legislature to reform police, and what I'm concerned about in there is the elimination of qualified immunity. And we both know that qualified immunity goes far beyond police lawsuits, and I know we're in very good shape there, particularly with the recent accreditation of the town. Has Maya given us any guidance, or is there guidance available anywhere else to say how the elimination of qualified immunity might affect our insurance rates?
It's an excellent question that I will pose to them. I don't know the answer.
Thank you.
I've been following it with a little bit of interest. I don't know where we are in the legislative process, how close they are. Really
There are competing bills now.
Yeah,
The
there's a
governor
lot
has a
of
bill, and the House has a
disagreement.
bill, right.
So if my understanding is correct, the governor's proposal got legs in the House, and the Senate proposal goes far beyond the House's original language.
I believe you're correct.
There's going to be quite a bit of wrangling
Yes.
over that, I'm sure.
Late night, last minute wrangling.
Yeah. Again, that's a question I think we should pose, because there are some fundamental building blocks to law enforcement and prosecution, and
Its
you can't
application
have
goes.
anything
Yeah.
close to law enforcement without them. So they got to be a little bit careful about not going too deep into that.
And it's a concept that's applicable to suits against government in general, not limited to police, so,
Yeah, we don't want to see our exposure go up.
no. That's it, thank you.
That's it? All right, so we're into open session topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting. The only thing I have is that BVT sent a second request to the town of Douglas asking if we had intentions of giving them a contribution of CARES Act funding. I took the liberty of responding to them. I'd be happy to read the email into the notes if you'd like it, but the general gist of it was I had expressed some concern with their ask of funding for what we were using as reimbursable funds from the CARES Act, as they did not donate or sacrifice any PPE to our fire or police departments throughout the course of the pandemic. And I don't recall seeing any BVT staff assisting, aiding, or donating anything during the community outreach program. So my general gist was the dollar value that we intend to allocate to Blackstone Valley Tech is $0.00, but thank you so much for asking.
I would add to that that I believe when the town applies for any grant reimbursement, including CARES or anything else, we apply for that with the idea of replacing money that we have actually spent for a covered purpose. If we then take that money and decide to give it to an outside entity, I think we would run the risk of running afoul of the CARES language, the enabling language. In other words, we can't get reimbursement and then say, oh, now we've got the reimbursement, we'll give it away to someone else.
I think that they were kind of emboldened to be asking because I believe Upton did offer them an allocation of, I think, $20,000 or $25,000.
25,000. Yeah, this is probably one of the more bizarre moments in the
Right.
3 years that I can remember, because there's no plan. It's not, I have a plan that I need to do remote schooling, and I hope you guys would help me out, and I'll need about this much. No, that's not what he asked for. He said, tell me what you'll give me, and I'll come up with a plan later, and we'll tell you how we spent it. Well, nobody does that. That's just, nobody does that.
That's right up there with the, sign the bill and I'll let you read it after.
Exactly.
So,
It's like giving your 17-year-old $100 and go and send him to the mall. Tell me what you buy. Can't get a phone for $100.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're missing a zero.
That guy in the trench coat thinking,
Yeah. But so, yeah, that's just, is really strange.
so that's all I have. Mr. Hughes, you got anything?
I do not.
Mr. Davis?
No, I think we've covered the world and all its problems.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Or, I'm a citizen.
Sure, can you identify your name and address?
Yes, my name's Jeremy Flansburgh. I live at 63 Monroe Street. I live directly across the street from 93. And 93 Davis Street,
Okay.
where the potential, they call it product sale, but we all know what it is. Anyway, I just want to mention to the board that we spent probably well over $50 million in our schools. And right up the street now, you want to put this product store up. And I just want you guys to know, and ladies, excuse me, that the whole track team, the whole cross-country team, they run all of them up Route 16, right back past this place, and they take a left down the dirt road, which is the abandoned Monroe Street. And I love seeing them. But I don't think this is the best place for this 93 Monroe Street operation. And I own the property across the street, which I believe is 73 Davis Street. But my house is at 63 Monroe Street. So I just wanted to add my little 2 cents in. Thank you.
Thank you for your concern.
Well, we will be having a public hearing on this, so there's a chance for him to voice his opinion at that time.
All right, thank you. If there's a public meeting on this, I would love it. Because, remember, I have problems, not problems, but I have issues with my well if this goes in, and the value of my property.
So it's also something that I know planning is still meeting with them with site plan review, so it might make sense for you to participate in the planning board meeting as well. All right.
I'm just worried about the value of my property. Thank you.
No, understood. So I'd recommend that you go to the next planning board meeting and bring your concerns up to them as well. But I appreciate you calling in. With that being, you're welcome. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Dave Cortez, aye.
Hal Davis, aye.
Mike Hughes,
Kevin Morris, aye.
good night, gentlemen.
Good night.